In this video, I'm going to show you some fascinating things you can do with Pro Tools 11, Notion 6, and Kontakt 5. Pro Tools is a digital audio workstation application, and it can host Kontakt 5 virtual instruments. Notion 6 is a music notation and MIDI sequencer program, and it also can host Kontakt 5. Now, the fascinating part is that you can write music notation in Notion 6 on external MIDI staves and send the MIDI over to Pro Tools, and Pro Tools will then use the MIDI to play Kontakt 5 instruments. But you also in Notion 6 can host Kontakt 5 instruments and use music notation directly in Notion 6 to play the Kontakt 5 instruments, and in a ReWire session you can send that audio generated by the Kontakt 5 instruments, you can send that audio over to Pro Tools. So you can actually have several Kontakt 5 instruments hosted in Notion 6 and another set of Kontakt 5 instruments hosted in Pro Tools 11, and you can get all that stuff going at one time, and ReWire keeps it synchronized. Now you need a virtual MIDI cable, maybe several of them depending on the way you configure it, to communicate back and forth between Pro Tools 11 and Notion 6 for the MIDI, and ReWire happens automatically. But the key to ReWire is that you start the ReWire host controller, which will be Pro Tools 11. You start it first. That makes it the ReWire host controller, and then you start Notion 6, and that makes it a ReWire slave. And the rule regarding audio is that ReWire slaves can send audio to the host controller, but it's the host controller's duty to play the audio. Even though you're generating audio in Notion 6, if you want to hear it, you have to send it over to Pro Tools when you're in a ReWire session. This is what we're going to look at as quickly as possible, but it's kind of complicated. It's not that difficult to do once you see how it works, and it's just very useful. Now, this is the Pro Tools 11 project that I already have set up, and what it has is it's got a audio track for the microphone that I'm using. It has a few Notion 6 ReWire audio tracks that are coming in, and it also has 2 Kontakt 5 instruments that it's hosting, and it has 2 MIDI tracks, one MIDI track for each of the hosted Kontakt 5 instruments. And so that's what's going on over here on the Pro Tools side. When you are configuring things, you want to start out with MIDI and then go MIDI Studio, and on the Mac that's going to bring up Audio MIDI Setup, and it'll be the MIDI Studio window, and there's this thing called IAC Driver, and that's where your virtual MIDI cables are. I've got 3 of them: IAC bus 1, IAC bus 2, IAC bus 3, and so that's the setup for the virtual MIDI cables. And then let's see, if you look under here in MIDI and then MIDI devices, you'll see that there are several MIDI input devices. I'm running a Motu 828 Mark II, and you can see the 3 IAC drivers, and I've also got a IK Multimedia Stealth pedal, and so that's what's going on there. Now if you look over here on these instrument tracks, they're set to receive input from Notion, and so I'm going to click on one so you can see what happens. You go over here and you see this ReWire plugin, and that's where you can specify the the ReWire channel pair that comes from Notion. I mean, there's a whole list of them. It's very important because if you want to have the instruments separated, you need to send them over on separate ReWire channel pairs. Now on the MIDI tracks, you've got their I/O. There is going to be coming in from one of the IAC drivers. In this instance, IAC driver IAC bus 1 channel 1, and then this MIDI channel is IAC driver IAC bus 1 channel 2, and the output on these is to the respective hosted Kontakt instruments. So the way this works is that Notion is sending MIDI over to this MIDI channel. This MIDI channel is then using the MIDI it receives to play this Kontakt instrument. So that's what's going on over here on the Pro Tools side. Now let's switch to Notion. Got Notion right here, and this is the way the Notion project looks. And you can see up here this little kind of a ribbon thing that's going to tell you that ReWire is running and that Notion is a ReWire slave, and so that's great. And if you go into Notion setup, you'll see that we've got some staves here for the Kontakt 5 instruments that are hosted by Notion, but we've also got some external MIDI staves, and these are external MIDI port A channel 1 and external MIDI port A channel 2. So that we can see how this works, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click on external MIDI, and I'm going to select MIDI port A, and I'm going to go over here and select channel 3, and that's now going to create a external MIDI stave. I'm going to go to this one, and I'm going to copy the more descriptive name and get out of that, and then I'll go down here and I'll paste it in, and I'll change it to channel 3, and I usually like to have the short name be the same as the long name. And so now there's an external MIDI staff, and so we're going to exit score setup, and what I'm going to do is I don't know, I'm going to select these notes, and I'm going to copy them, and then I'm going to paste them on this new external MIDI track so that we've got some notes, and that's great. And then I'm going to save the Notion project, and just for reference, Notion preferences, this is where you tell it what to do with the MIDI. So for MIDI input, I've got IAC driver, IAC bus 1. Notion really, you're not going to send a bunch of MIDI to Notion and it's going to play instruments. Notion will receive input from like a MIDI keyboard, so you can use that to play and it'll record that, and that's all great. But for what we're doing, we're focused on MIDI output. I've also got that set to IAC driver, IAC bus 1, and you can actually have 4 ports, and each port can have 16 channels, so you can have 64 stereo channels of MIDI that you can send someplace, for example, to Pro Tools. Okay, so we're going to get out of that. Now, if you go look at the Notion mixer, you can see that okay, this is one of the Kontakt 5 staves. It's a piano. It's a Cuban piano, and so that's all great. Now that we have the new external MIDI track set up in Notion 6, we're going to do the setup over here in Pro Tools 11. And we're going to start off by creating a new MIDI track. So we're going to go up here and we're going to click on Track, New, and then we're going to select MIDI track here. And we're going to say Create. And now we've got a MIDI track, and we're going to move it over here so it's lined up a little better. Yeah. And then we're going to create a instrument track. And so we're going to go in the instrument track, and we're going to want that to be stereo, so we're going to set it stereo. And we're going to leave it on ticks. Now there's two choices here. There's ticks and samples. Samples is I guess like vibrations or frequencies or the normal audio stuff you'd see. Digital samples. Ticks is a different way of keeping track of time. It's more precise, and so MIDI likes that, and you can figure out which way you want to use it. Great. So we're creating that. Now we've created a instrument track, and it's over here, so we're going to move it over, put it next to the other instruments. Yeah, come on, get over there. There you go. Yeah. And let's see, we're going to make this a Kontakt 5 synth. And so this is just to name it. We're going to go up here to the insert. We're going to click on it and go multi-channel plugins. We're going to go here to instruments. So we're going to do Kontakt 5 AAXX stereos, and then that's going to pull up Kontakt 5, and then we're going to try elements. I think maybe yeah, that's it. Now for some reason the Kontakt 5 instruments are really hot, so you want to go up here to this master volume and pull it down a pretty good bit, and then when you look over here, you can kind of see where it's coming in on the volume level. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. And so we're almost through with that. We're going to do one more thing, which we need to do. This is very important. You'll notice that up here on the MIDI, it's MIDI port A channel 1, but we're sending it from Notion on MIDI port A channel 3. So you want to change that to channel 3. So that's really good. And you can see also over here on this on this other one, it's MIDI port A channel 2. That's on the guitar, and then the Cuban trumpet is MIDI port A channel 1. So that's just another layer of stuff that you have to keep track of, and that's great. And so general idea is to make stuff look similar, kind of a pattern. So if we look at MIDI 1.2, its input is set over here in the predefined to IEC driver bus 1 channel 2, and so we're going to want to do the same thing over here on this new MIDI, and then we're at the same time we're going to put a dot 3, so that tells us that it's MIDI 1.3, and so that's going to be just very useful. Yeah. And this is just mind-boggling. It's like channel 2, channel 3, channel 3. It's like, I don't know, there's like 256 of them or 512 or something. You just I have no idea. I mean, golly, that's that makes my life better. And so you want to go to predefine down here, and you want to go over to IEC driver, IEC bus 1, and it's coming in from channel 3. And so yeah, and you're going to find that in the reference guide for sure, right? Okay, and let's see the output here. Well, on this one, the output is to Kontakt 5. So let's follow that pattern, and we're going to do Kontakt 5 MIDI 3, and then I guess we'll just do channel 1. Is that what the pattern is? Yeah, it's like they all seem to be. We've got them on. We've got them going to channel 1 or something. I don't know. Let's see. Is that look right? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's channel 1. So they're all channel 1. So it's Kontakt 5 MIDI 1 in 1. Kontakt 5 MIDI in 2. Kontakt 5 MIDI in 3. And it's a pattern, and so that's all good. And then we also have to remember to we want to select this record enable so we can hear it. If this is all working right, I'm going to solo it and play, and we should hear that synthesizer deal. Yeah, and I mean that's just I mean it's kind of mind-boggling, but I don't know. I've had Pro Tools for like I don't know. Well, I got it yesterday afternoon. Then it's 8:30 in the morning, so I figure I'm doing pretty good, right? Anyway, so here's the Notion 6 project, and it's got the 3 external MIDI staves, and it's sending these notes over to Pro Tools 11 to play Kontakt 5 instruments hosted in Pro Tools 11, but it also has several Kontakt 5 instruments that it's hosting itself, and it's playing them with this music notation. So there's just a lot of stuff you can do, and it's I think it's pretty fascinating, and it works. Now there's a newer thing, ReWire MIDI, but it doesn't appear that Pro Tools 11 supports ReWire MIDI. Notion 6 supports ReWire MIDI, but maybe Pro Tools 12 supports it. I don't have Pro Tools 12. I'm running the trial version of Pro Tools 11. It's full featured, but external MIDI works just as fine. It's just that you need a virtual MIDI driver. On the Mac, you get one automatically through Audio MIDI setup, so it's easy on the Mac. But if you're doing it on Windows, there are virtual MIDI cables for Windows also. So it's all good, and I don't know. I'm just totally confused. This is just a lot of stuff to keep track of, but it does work, and that's really good because you can do some cool stuff. And the trick to it is that what you want to do is you want to create a Notion 6 project that's got all the, a bunch of stuff in it, and a Pro Tools 11 project that's got a bunch of stuff in it, and it's all configured correctly, and it's all working. And then you save those, and then next time you want to start a new song, you open them up and do a save as, and then you're all fixed up. You might want to put in some different instruments or change stuff around, but you don't have to go through and just configure everything in vast detail, because it will make you crazy. But this is good stuff, yeah. Okay, thanks.